Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Series 6 of the Climate Pioneers Show. This series, we are going to be discussing the challenges around scaling deep tech solutions within climate. Throughout the course of the series, I'm going to be speaking to investors, founders, venture builders, and other key ecosystem players who are all focused on scaling and commercialising groundbreaking deep tech innovations. We're going to explore how to prepare for the challenges that deep tech companies face around fundraising, scaling, team building, and we'll hear stories from those who have successfully scaled to Series A and beyond. So whether you are a founder yourself that's embarking upon the startup to scale up journey, perhaps you're an investor who's keen to understand more about what it's like to invest into the deep tech space, or maybe you're somebody that's just passionate about climate innovation. Whatever your background, there should be something for you to get stuck into throughout this series. For episode 2, I am delighted today to be joined by Ian Lee, Innovation Projects Lead at UK Power Networks, where he's building corporate partnerships with startups that are innovating in the energy sector and beyond. So Ian, thank you so much for joining me.
Good afternoon, Sherry. Yeah, lovely to be on the podcast.
Thank you so much. And I think it would be really helpful to kick off by explaining what your role at UK Power Networks is and what the focus of the innovation team is, because you're not a typical corporate investor, right? There's a distinction there. You're more focused around that commercial partnerships, R&D piece. So can you explain that distinction for us?
Exactly. Yeah. So if you imagine, angel investors, corporate investors, VCs, all these investor profiles people, they typically look at startups, companies, and to look at taking over or having a piece of the company to invest in with a return, financial return, or in whatever in kind. Whereas a company like in the UKPN, in the innovation team, we're really looking at partners for potential projects or even initiatives that we've got. And really, it's just having that ability to work with startups or organizations, whoever they are, and really just help the company, UKPN in this case, help the company just to help our network be better, help reduce customers' bills, vulnerable customers, making sure no one's left behind, making sure our network is resilient. There's so many things to consider, how we invest, who we invest with, and all that stuff. So yeah, so my role basically is to first of all scout out potential partnerships, companies, organizations, projects. So writing up the business cases, doing the cost benefit analysis, all that fun stuff. Because at the end of the day, I would like to have money just thrown at projects, but obviously that's not really fair on the company. And also we've obviously got regulatory requirements to make sure everything is done properly in the correct fashion.
Amazing. So it's less about that sort of typical dilutive funding where you're giving money and you're taking a piece of equity. It's more about you as a business of funding commercial pilots with really interesting technology startups that could benefit UK Power Networks and your customers. Yeah. Okay. Amazing. And talk me through your journey into that, because as a recruitment person, as a careers person, I always love the journeys, the career paths that people go on to get into this space. So, I mean, you started off in academia and mechanical engineering. Talk us through your path to where you are now.
So it's not as straightforward. My as you mentioned, my background is mechanical engineering. I did my degree in Belfast, Queen's University Belfast. I'm originally funny story. So I'm originally from Malaysia, and in Malaysia, obviously, we know of obviously the big universities, and I knew at the time I wanted to do mechanical engineering, and my brother was in Norwich at the time, UEA, and I said, look, which university in the UK that does mechanical engineering and as far away from you, my brother, as possible. and and at the time the agent was like, oh, I just came back from Belfast, Queens, it's really nice. I was like, I'll take it. Yeah, that's where I went. So did my degree in Belfast, and then in my penultimate year I did an internship with Airbus, huge aerospace manufacturing company, and then went on, finished the degree, and then went back to the grad scheme. And after grad scheme, I then worked as within the automation and robotics team. really super cool projects they're working on. Imagine large machines, bringing in, and I worked as a project engineer there, and and that was based in North Wales, which
Mhm.
is really lovely. I don't know if you've ever been, but it's a really nice place. But me and my girlfriend at the time, now wife, we've said we're basically living we're just too comfortable, if you like. Fridays after work, I would be beach chair in hand, a cold beverage, straight down, 5 minutes walk to the beach.
Oh, how
Um,
lovely.
um, so I think it was in 2022. We thought, you know what, it's time for a change. We want to get that hustle and bustle life in the big city. So we had a look: Manchester, Birmingham, Glasgow, Edinburgh, and eventually, obviously, London was the choice. It's just so diverse and plenty of opportunities. Um, and obviously, that's when I got researching potential companies, and I thought I want to stay within my domain of understanding, i.e., large corporate companies. That is also out of my technical knowledge, so electrical engineering, electrical companies. So UKPN sort of fit that puzzle, if you like. So yeah, and then here I am. I applied for an innovation role, which is great because you don't actually need electrical degree to work in the innovation team for any companies. That's my advice. Anyone looking into going into any innovation team, you don't actually have to be specific engineer in that industry. You just need to have the right mindset, the right appetite, and the hunger to try and just try things.
Yeah. I was going to say, how does and you said you don't need that specific
Mm,
engineering and electronics background to go into
yeah.
innovation. But there
Mm,
must be some ways in which your engineering background does really help with the work that you're
mm.
doing and in assessing these businesses and these startups that you're talking to. How does it help? What aspects of that kind of engineering background do you find you use day to day in that role?
Mm. I think it's just having a very systematic approach
Right.
when dealing with a potential partner. Because look, it's very easy to, I've fallen into that trap as well early days of, oh, let's have a coffee, let's talk about things, and then that discussion doesn't lead to anything, and it's just stagnant, and then you get follow-up calls, follow emails, and all that. I'm sure I'm sure everyone's gone through that journey as well. But I think at some point it clicked to me and say, oh, actually, my experience in manufacturing, we've got in the manufacturing world, there's lean principles, lean philosophies, and there's it's just taking a holistic approach of, okay, if a potential partner comes in, okay, how do I engage them? Okay, in that case, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? What are the enablers? What are they capable of delivering? What can't they deliver? And
Mm.
what sort of compromise? What can we compromise? How are they going to solve it? Just having that systematic approach, I think, just help me when I join the team, and that's how I operate now. I've I've got this imaginary checklist now when I go to events, functions. In my mind, I've already got these set questions to ask just to filter out, is this going to provide value to the company? Yes, great. We'll then go on, take it further. If not, then thank you very much for your time. We might consider you in the future, but for now, thanks very much.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's how I think.
That's smart because you're right. I think a lot of people, even very experienced people who've been doing,
Mm,
this sort of work for years, will probably still be stuck in that cycle of having an exploratory coffee, see how it goes. So to be a lot more systematic about how you're spending your
mm,
time and where you're prioritizing that effort, and to build a framework around that, albeit an
mm.
imaginary framework, super smart.
Yeah, I think you just got to be flexible as well. I think there's a degree of flexibility because look, innovation, we're always trying to do something we've never done before, right? There's certain things that we're doing in UKPN no one else has done before, and so part of that conversation as well is this partner able to be flexible with me to get on this journey,
Mm.
or are they too rigid because of expectations or their financial backers or whatever the factors is? If they can't be flexible with us, then again, that's also another, I won't say cross in the box, but that's also another factor whether or not we take it further.
And without necessarily listing off every one of those criteria
Mm,
and what boxes you're looking to tick, generally speaking, what kind
mm,
of technologies or startups are you interested in building these partnerships with? Because I said in the intro, they're energy and beyond.
Yeah.
So talk me about the sorts of things you're looking at and interested in.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I could go off a very long list and a criteria, but I think in general, I can give you like the general themes if you like. So
Yeah.
the obvious ones, resilient network. You know, how can we make sure our network are resilient, especially as we see now storms are getting more and more. How can we build a more resilient network? Our infrastructure, our processes. How can we make them more resilient? How can we enhance safety? There's always, always we never stop at safety. We're always trying to see how else can we better improve. I think if anyone says, "Oh, we've done enough for safety," then that's
Red flag.
it's never a good sign. So there's always things to do safety. Um, there's one interesting one because I've had this discussion with various people. So reducing OpEx,
Mm,
operational expenditure, and this is not necessary for profits purposes, right? But imagine for us, UKPN, we're a DNO, distribution network operator. So if you like, our profits from is fixed to a certain degree. So customers bill outstanding charges. Part of that comes to us to manage the network, distribute the network. Part of that go to National Grid, for example, to uh, distribute, transmit the network, transmission network. So if we are able to reduce OpEx, that means that we've got more money then to invest in infrastructure, and at the end of the day, reduce that customers' bills. Might be not short term, but in the future, we might be able to do certain projects because we've reduced our operational costs. Um, so that's an interesting one. And there's other stuff as well, like how can we support our vulnerable customers. So we're fortunate enough, I think, we've got roof over our heads, we've got electricity, but there are people within our footprint that are less fortunate, or more vulnerable than you and I. So how can we help those customers, and also how can we provide better customer service as well. So we always say, we're one of the top customer service DNOs out there, but there's always room for improvement. I think our latest score, I think we're about 93, 94%. So there's always that push of what else can we do to get better customer service. And last but not least, for just to summarize, flexibility on the network. So how can we? So imagine if we invest in the new towers, for example, new infrastructure, that's going to cost a lot of money. So how can we invest or look at enhancing existing infrastructure, i.e. flexibility, um, at a lower cost to consumers? Because to upgrade the network, someone has to pay for it, right? Ultimately, that's a taxpayer. So how can we maximize the utility of our current network? So flexibility comes into play. So yeah, those are the general themes, if you like.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so resilience, safety, efficiency, like reducing OpEx,
Yeah,
inclusion, customer experience, and flexibility
yeah.
being the core things. And so, if there are companies out there that are innovating in those areas and are potentially interested in talking to UKPN about partnerships,
Mm,
what then, in terms of the readiness of their technology, the level that they're at, the stage of
mm.
maturity that they're at what point are they right for you to be looking at a partnership with?
Um, so if I don't know if you have you came across this, the TRL scale, technical
I have,
readiness
but
level?
explain it for anyone who's listening that hasn't.
Yeah. So okay. So you've got a scale. So the Ofgem, I'm taking it for Ofgem, Office for Gas and Electricity Market. That's our regulator. So this is their definition, right? So you've got between TRL, technical readiness level, between 1 and 9.
Mm-hmm.
So 1 is just you're still at that pure research phase, very theoretical, experimental work. 2 to 3 is where you've able to, okay, you can apply that research, and you can broaden the scientific and technical knowledge, and how can you apply it. So
Mm,
slightly, you slightly more advanced than just purely research. Then you've got TRL 4 to 6, which
mm,
is more of a development of more commercial applications.
mhm,
So this is where you are looking or are looking for validating your technology, or you've got a working demonstration.
mhm,
And then you've got 7 to 8, where you've got a full scale demonstration in a working environment to test. Um, that's like you're having a prototype, ready to go. And then you've got TRL 9, which is the technology in its final form, the final iteration, and it's ready to go to market. So with that in mind,
mm,
how we look at potential partners to invest our money with. In the team I'm in, the business funded innovation, we normally typically, I say typically, look at between TRL 7 to 9.
right.
So either you've got a prototype or
Mm,
you're ready to market.
yeah.
There might be some wiggle room between TRL 4 and 6, where if you've got if you still looking to validate technology, maybe we'll look at it. All depends, right? Depends on the technology it is. If it's something that, for example, if it's related to um, very highly toxic gases, there's a gas called SF6.
Yeah.
So it is highly toxic gas. Unfortunately, there's no direct replacement, and so there are still research going on. So those are the stuff, because of the high risk and effects of not investing in it. We will obviously look at it, and invest in it, potentially invest in it. But in general, I say in general terms, 7 and 9 is where that's the sweet spot.
Okay.
Um, there's also other funding routes as well.
Mhm.
So imagine the BFI is basically our shareholders. How the BFI was set up was our shareholders, and I wasn't in the room, right? But I imagine it went something like this. Our shareholders and Ofgem sat down in the room and say, look, we will match funding if you fund. We will match 25 million if you are willing to put your money where your mouth is, and you invest 25 million as well. So we've got 50 million pounds in the pot, in the BFI pot, for us to spend, to invest in between 2023 and 2028, which is our current regulatory period.
I see.
And so that is money ready, on paper, in a pot, ready to go. It's all internal governance.
Mm,
Whereas you've also got, there's two other pots of money, if you like, but there is like asking Ofgem for money.
mm,
So there's two things. So one is called the Network Innovation Allowance, or NIA, and the other one is called the SIF, Strategic Innovation Fund.
yeah.
So the NIA, they both have got very distinct requirements. So the NIA is your traditional, I would like to say traditional innovation pot of money. So you're asking Ofgem for money in order to facilitate the energy system transition, or it needs to benefit consumers, vulnerable consumers. Um, you know, if you imagine asking someone else for money to deliver projects. That's how I would best describe it.
Right.
Um, with the SIF one, Strategic Innovation Fund, that is a set challenge set by Ofgem. So there is a time period, if you like. So Ofgem and UKRI, UKRI, the
Research.
research. Yeah, exactly. Thanks very much. Um,
Okay.
they set out this challenge, innovation challenge, and basically they put it on the market. I think anyone can have a look at it. It's on the Gov website, and they go call for ideas, and they basically look at potential partners and obviously network, like ourselves and other DNOs as well, um, and basically bid on the ideas to say, yeah, I can do this, I can do that, and then that takes on. They've got different phases to it. So that structure is to help with very large, key infrastructure projects, because
Yeah.
there's it's not anything large. I think it goes up to about 10 million, I think, and a longer time horizon. I think it's up to 5 years and up to 10 million. So that's the scale of the projects. So you can imagine there's a lot more. consultation process at the upfront. There's a alpha phase, discovery, and then beta phase is when it gets a lot more detail and how it gets delivered, right? So there's a lot of these challenges, and there's two very distinct pots of money for it.
I see.
I know my pot of money very well.
Yeah.
We're looking at very short-term projects. So anything that can deliver within the ED2 period, regulatory period between now and 2028, that's perfect for me. And maybe in another industry, being used in another industry, bring it in, use it in the electrical utility space. Great.
I see. Okay, cool. So things that are fairly mature as concepts and ideas, ready to scale at that sort of more advanced stage of TRL readiness. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. But given the challenges around scalability, especially for some of the more deep tech solutions there, so things that are not software, SaaS, easily scalable, I would imagine there are far fewer opportunities out there that have reached that stage of readiness, right? How are you seeing the market? Is it mainly that you're seeing more software related solutions that tend to be at that level of readiness and fewer deep tech or hardware focused solutions? What are you seeing as the mix?
Yeah, I think obviously with scalability in terms of what we can do, yeah, the software space is a lot. There's a lot more software because let me put this here, and I was speaking to someone, a VC actually the other day, and he said, look, software, and I'm not demeaning any software hardware. Look, if you think about it, software is easier to create, right? Because you've got so many tools available nowadays. I'm not saying it's easy to create, but it's compared to hardware, it's a lot easier to create a software solution because you've already got the base. You know, you can copy a lot of successful companies out there. Whereas with hardware, the thing with hardware is you have to go through this whole. It's not just about the device. You have to think about certification. You have to think about ergonomics. You have to think about health and safety. You know, there's a lot more constraints within the hardware space, and hence why the hardware always lags the software. You know, we've seen, AI, machine learning, all these great technologies, right? However, you don't see the same in terms of quantum computing hardware. It's
No.
not quite the same level.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, the software, the hardware always lags the software. So it's the same as well with the solution that we're trying to deploy as well. I'm working on projects, quite a few projects that's looking at improving processes, and a lot of them are obviously software based. Whereas the hardware ones, where we're looking at developing a product or a solution, a physical solution, it takes a longer time because we have to go in phases because it's a high risk. So we go in phases, we test it, small scale, see if it works, get a steering group, a group of people to get the feedback, and yeah, so the process is a lot longer. So based on what we've seen in the market, definitely, yeah, there's a lot more software solution providers out there. But again, the all credits to companies that are niche in their offerings. So I think one of the things we're seeing as well is companies are more democratizing. I can't pronounce that word right. Democratizing their data. So if you think about it historically, companies have been buying a off-the-shelf, turnkey, all-in-one solution for their IT solution, right? Say, look, this device, I want you to deliver everything for me and give me the data, and deal with the data. Whereas nowadays, we're looking at we want to deal with that data ourselves. So we'll buy the solution from you, but we're buying that data from you, and then we're using our own solutions to manipulate that data because we find that we're better. We know what we want better, right? We know what we want from the data. So that's one trend that I'm looking at the market as well.
Amazing. Okay, cool. And on that hardware side, so it is true that there are fewer hardware companies that have, because of the length of time the innovation process takes and all these different considerations, it takes them longer to get to market and get to that level of readiness that you need. What are you seeing as some of the main blockers or bottlenecks perhaps that those companies are facing as they're going on that journey? What are some of the market forces, ecosystem forces that are stopping them getting there quicker, so that there would be more of them that you could be investing or partnering with?
I think that the one that comes to mind straight away when you asked that question was
Mm.
the product maybe not fitting a wider industry problem.
Right. Okay.
So if you think about it, when someone creates a product, obviously they think about, they're probably putting in myself in an investor's or a founder's shoes here. When I develop a product, obviously I'm looking at my product, how can it fit in to solve this problem?
Mm.
But the one thing maybe is that if you look at the wider industry, robots is a good example.
Right.
So robots. So if you think about it, hazardous environment. When you think about hazardous environment, what comes to mind? Oil and gas, right?
Mm.
Nuclear plants and all this. But one thing that maybe they didn't come to mind is, well, other industries also have got tunnels, underground tunnels, which also is potentially a hazardous environment. So these are the things, and even construction sites. So
Mm.
these are the things that perhaps when they develop the product, they they might have looked at it, but I think the blocker is maybe they haven't gone, complementary industries for the products. Um, so that's one thing that comes to mind. The other thing is pilot our pilot traps is the other thing.
Right.
So organizations like myself, innovation teams like within UKPN, obviously we're happy to conduct pilots, trials with companies. But I think one thing that maybe startups can do better is maybe a route to what we call BAU, business as usual.
Okay.
So a lot of times they're happy to, we'll trial it, we'll test it, we'll help, how can we solve your problem, blah blah. But maybe the one thing they probably lack is, okay, how can we then turn this into a BAU early on? Because sometimes they leave it too late, and at
Yeah.
that point is like, well, now I found another company can do it, or there's another solution out there, or we've changed our mind, our scope change, so I think for startup, and again, because startup needs speed,
Mm.
um, they need to be very clear early on, whoever they pilot with or trial their product with, they need to make sure that they've got a very clear uh, BAU transition uh, solution, or that in mind, and anyway they need to have that front and center when they
Mm.
pilot with companies like UKPN.
That's super interesting. So
Mm,
having both a kind of, I suppose what you're saying is a lot of these startups have too narrow and too short term a horizon. So
mm,
both lengthening and broadening the horizon that they're looking at, lengthening in terms of how do we get this, instead of just doing a pilot to see if it works, and then if it does work, well, not really having thought through where we'd go from there, having
mm,
a strong plan for how this would then get integrated BAU into how the company operates, and then a wider horizon being, rather than just being really focused on this one specific application of this technology, broadening
mm.
out how it could be applied over different industries. And so I suppose, would part of that be an issue around commercialization and commercial strategy, and maybe founders of some of these startups being too focused on maybe being too academics, probably the wrong word, right, but too
Mm.
specialist in their particular area or in the particular technology, and needing somebody that's maybe more commercial in the team to build out that sort of longer term and broader strategy for them?
Yeah, 100%. I think that the thing that look, I understand, right? At the very start of a startup cycle, obviously you want to prove your concept very quickly, very to get funding, to grow, to scale, right? So I understand that. So with that in mind, 100%, in that case, in where if you're a very early stage of your startup, fair enough, you've got to at least prove out the concept first, making sure your product works. But then when you get to later stage, this is where it comes in mind. You need to get someone who is more commercially astute to look at the other horizons.
Mm.
And this is where the type of investor profile that you're looking to bring in, either angel investor, VC, or corporate, you know, it plays a big part. And not to sound negative, but if you pick the wrong one,
Mm,
it can be quite detrimental, because I from what I understand, VCs, they're looking at, okay, how can we short-term exit strategies, how can we make sure that your company grows, and then obviously exit. Corporates, they're looking at long-term value, all these different things. So
mm,
my advice is have a balanced investor profile within the startup, and to identify all these pockets of markets, if you like, that maybe initially that you haven't thought about and might not fit 100%, um, but it could be an interesting use case in other industries.
absolutely. And companies that tend to get to this stage at which they'd be ready for you to partner with, they will
Mm,
have been taking external investment to get them to this point, right? So they'll
mm,
already they'll be on a kind of fundraising track. What
yeah.
stage do they tend to be at by the time they come to you? I know that's a very broad question because it'll vary slightly, but does it tend to be a sort of Series A plus company that you're sort of looking at?
Um, I mean, for us, it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
which funding they're in their journey. We look at the end product, because
Mm,
as an innovation investor, if you like, I use that word lightly, investor. Um, we are just looking at how can your product give us value,
yeah.
to the company, to customers. So we don't really, not to say we don't care, but we don't really, we don't mind where in terms of your funding journey is. Obviously, we want you to be sustainable, i.e.,
Mm,
we don't want you to go bankrupt like 2 years down the line or during our innovation trials or pilots, right? Um, but yeah, in general, yeah, it doesn't. We're not really that bothered, if you like.
no. So what does a due diligence journey for a startup working on partnership with you look like? So from the point where you've kind of gone through that this invisible checklist in your head and thought, right,
Mm,
you're around the right level, you fit into one of those 6 key themes, you're around the
mm,
right level of technology maturity. What then? To get past that initial bar, what does that process then look like from
mm,
there through to actually we've got a partnership or a pilot in action?
mm. Um, so I should caveat this to say, look, because we're not a VC, right? So obviously our due diligence is probably not as thorough as a traditional VC, meaning we probably don't go into the company and
Mm,
understand the because that's not what we do. At the end of the day, we're just interested in the product, as I mentioned earlier, and what
mm,
value. So in terms of due diligence, in terms of startups or companies coming to us, we've got an excellent, what we call bids and opportunities team, and so they're like the first line of defense in terms of ideas, pilots, and all these, or even startups that come to us, and they basically sift out. So we've got really intelligent people working in UKPN. We've got really senior network engineers, planners, designers, all these very highly technical people, and we engage the bids and opportunities team. They engage with their business and say, look, is this idea worth investing or looking at further, right? So that they do the initial screening, and they've got a much thorough checklist. They look at the financials, timeline, timescales, what can they do, what actually is the problem they're being solved, all that sort of stuff. So they are the first line of defense in terms of our due diligence.
mhm,
And then after that, with that, obviously we've got other guidance we use as well. Obviously, we've got the as a utility company, we've got the I think it's 2016 utility contract regulations.
mhm,
So any money that we partner with, invest in, or tender, obviously that comes into play. Um, but we've also got other partner organizations like the EIC. I think Energy Innovation Council, where they are an organization that can help us to find other startups, if you like. So we can go to them with a problem statement and say, look, we probably don't know anyone in this space that can solve this problem. here it is. Can you go out and do like a call for innovations, rather call for tender, call for innovation um, across the industry to say who can help us with this innovation. And so so they've also got that capability of doing that due diligence as well for the suppliers.
Mm,
Um, and I think lastly, if a company wants to obviously pass that pilot that go past that pilot page, obviously if
mm,
they want to work with UKPN, then obviously there's the formal um, vendor route. So we use this database called via Achilles. I don't know if you've heard of it, Achilles utility vendor database. So if anyone out there, if you're if your company is well defined or quite mature, feel free to register on it, and you can obviously advertise your services to all the utility companies in the UK.
amazing. So once they've done that pilot phase, they can then, go through that framework, as it were, to then be a proper supplier.
Yeah,
Longer term.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go. And how deep do you dive on the technology? So I appreciate obviously not being an investor per
Mm,
se. We made that distinction clear. Not being an investor, you're less concerned with the team and the future returns and the long-term viability of the business. This for you
mm,
is about, can we get a commercial pilot project going that can deliver quickly, fits within that time horizon to 2028, and that they can stay financially sustainable throughout that time.
mm.
How deep do you dive um, on the technology and on the product itself, and on how well it will perform in the pilot? And do you know what I mean? How deep do
Yeah.
you dive on that?
Again, for me, obviously, I rely on really really smart people within the business.
Yeah,
We've got corporate, they call it a corporate memory. So we've got a lot of the stuff we've tried have already been made, potentially have been tested in one form or another in the past.
right.
So having the ability to go up to some of the really senior engineers and say, look, we're gonna test this device. Has this been tested before? And if they say, and they're like um, our fountain of knowledge, if you like, if you want to call it. Um, and they're really able to tell us, look, we've tested this. It works in a certain way. If the company can do X, Y, Z
Mm,
based on lessons learned, then great. If not, then we might say share the same fate as we did in the past.
yeah,
Um, but again, it's having that ability to tell the startups or companies to say, look, this might not work, but are you flexible enough to work with us
mm,
to make it into something that will work?
yeah,
I think that's the key. So in essence, there we're not a lot of the times we're not saying no outright. We're saying, okay, no, but can you do this instead um, to fit our requirements?
yeah. And that flexibility you mentioned earlier is
Mm,
key, right? To show that they can
exactly.
adapt. And yeah, yeah, yeah. Cool. Um, and are there gaps that you're seeing in terms of, we talked there about the mix being very much more software than hardware
Mm,
because of what we've already discussed, but are
mm,
there other gaps that you're seeing around perhaps certain types of founders that are less represented, perhaps because they're not making their way through getting the funding, getting the support earlier on to get to this level? um, and are there types of solutions or types of technology that you're not seeing, that where you're seeing these gaps? I know you said before there about going to EIC and getting them to put a call out for innovation if there are areas
mm,
that you're not seeing solutions in. Where are
mm.
the gaps that you're seeing?
Oh, that's a good question. I think at the moment, it's all about understanding the look. We operate within a very complicated and very robust regulations.
Mm,
So I think the gap is companies that might be saying, look, I've got this bright and shiny idea product, but the gap is understanding, having companies to actually have the use case well defined for in our case the utility industry. I'll give you an
Okay.
example. So, as you know, there are AI, machine learning, visual learning out there, companies out there, and they're quite generalist. They say, look, I can give you reduce inspection time by, I don't know, 5-10%. Startups out there, they're saying they claim these numbers. But actually, when you dig a bit deeper, um, they probably don't have the right skills and knowledge to actually solve what we're facing in the utility company,
Mm.
for example. Um, and I think that's the gap there is the gap of startups, especially software, because I work with a lot of software providers. Um, the gap, especially in software, is they've got this great product, but the gap is having the use case tailored specifically to the end user. I think that's a massive gap there. Because there's loads of interesting tech out there, but it's just that making that use case specific. I think
Yeah.
that's the gap.
And if the founders themselves don't come from a background in utilities and don't understand the space, I'm guessing
Mm.
how could they convince you of how could they bridge that gap themselves internally? Would that be through, advisors, consultants that could help them to do that?
Potentially, but also there's obviously there's events, conferences,
Mm.
and um, and other DNOs. We but also remember what I said about the strategic innovation fund. So those are challenges. So knowing what the challenges are, and if you look at historical challenges, you get a feel of the recurring trend as well.
Okay, yeah.
So,
So you
so
can see if you go onto the SIF and the website, I'm guessing you can look at what all the previous challenges were to get an
yeah,
idea of
exactly.
trends. And
Yeah.
interesting. Oh my
because
goodness.
because there's all Ofgem, obviously it's all regulated, so everything is fully transparent. You can see past projects, progresses, and challenges. All this is all out there. So the information's out there. It's
Mm,
just I think a lot of startups is just not are just not aware of,
yeah.
of, of, of a lot of these things. Like for me personally, like before I joined UKPN, I didn't even know about all these as well, right? I didn't know you could go into I've never heard of the EIC. I've never
Mm,
heard of I've heard of Ofgem, but I've never heard of the SIF, the NI, all these different things. Um so try to like I said earlier, right? Broaden your horizons. Have a look at information's all out there. It's just how can you then take that product, market it to a utility specific use case? I think that's
absolutely.
make the better.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. And you mentioned about this time horizon that you're working within, this pot of 50 million you've got between 2023, 2028 to deploy.
Mhm.
Are you able to share with us how that's going? How much have you deployed and to what sort of project have you got going through this pot of money? Are you able to share that with us? You're allowed to?
Um, um, all I'll say is that you'd think it's easy having this money in your pocket technically because on paper we've technical like I said we've technical that we're not asking Ofgem for money, right? This money is already, if you like, in an imaginary piggy bank, and
Yeah.
all we're asking is we're just going to our directors say, look, can we have that money, and then run this project. So it's mainly internal governance. So you think that's easy, but I can assure you it's not, because the amount of great ideas out there. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great ideas, great startups, companies out there, but it's just making that business commercial viability, commercial sense.
Yeah.
Um, so one thing we're seeing is some of these startups, which is great, they're coming to us, but some of their pricing strategy might put
Mm,
them, it might put us off. Um, Look, I can understand why, right? The startup obviously they need to have some way of growing, and so I can fully understand it. But obviously from a corporate business, obviously we're looking at more competitive pricing, costing, because obviously at the end of the day we need to make sure that there's a return, a return on investment. So hopefully that gives you a pseudo answer in terms of how we're doing. We're doing okay in terms of projects. We're really healthy in terms of the amount of projects we've got in the pipeline. Um, but yeah, all I'll say is the type of projects working on is really interesting. There's no um, fixed types of project.
Mm.
I can share one which is obviously publicly available, which is the automated tunnel inspection robot. So we're looking at how can we better inspect our tunnels. So within London, our London network, we've got uh, a lot of underground tunnels where we run electrical cable, which is why if you're ever in London, you look up, there's no overhead lines. If you ever notice that next time,
I
so
noticed that.
a
Yeah.
lot of it is underground. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So it is, and I've had the opportunity to go in one before, and it's not a nice place to work in. You can imagine it's dark, it's confined, a lot of sharp objects. So yeah, so having the ability to test out something being used in other industries
Mm.
and putting it to use in ours really shows how we're also exploring, as we mentioned at the very start, in energy and beyond.
Mm.
So what else can we take from other industries and use it? Because they are the quick wins, right? Because they're already established products for other industries.
Yeah.
Okay, great. How can we bring it to us? Because that's a shorter term development compared to imagine an R&D project, that sort of stuff. So
Yeah. Very
yeah.
interesting. And what are you looking forward to across the rest of this year? What are you going to be up to? I would imagine in a role like yours, you're going to be at lots of events, getting out there, meeting people. Yeah. What are you looking forward to this year?
Um, I think I'm excited or looking forward to the additional investments in the from the government in terms of our energy generation infrastructure,
Yeah.
and how can we reduce the queue. Because I don't know if you read the articles, we're saying, look, we've got a lot of potential generation potential in Great Britain, but how can we um, streamline, how can you make that process a lot quicker? So I'm quite interested and excited for that, because obviously the more quicker these low carbon generation gets connected, obviously the cheaper our bills are, then the happy we all are, right? um, and also I guess I'm also looking forward to how we develop our nuclear and hydrogen strategy,
Mm.
because those are the two big players, I think. At you know if you 10 years ago, it was similar 10 years ago, where AI, machine learning was this shiny new thing. Nuclear and hydrogen is that thing.
And you used to
So
work
how
in that, right? Earlier on in your career, you did some hydrogen fuel cell stuff.
not quite. I work for Airbus, and they had some hydrogen. They looked at hydrogen aircrafts, but I wasn't involved in it. But I knew they were working on some sort of hydrogen aircraft.
Yeah.
Is still in development. But yeah, so as
Mm.
a fuel, hydrogen is a fuel.
Yeah.
Exciting space to be.
Yeah. Okay. So hydrogen, nuclear, and the investment that's going to come from the government to reduce the queues and get people grid connections quicker.
Mm,
Yeah, interesting. And how can people get in touch with you? So, if there are people listening to this today who are building specifically within energy, or not building in another industry, and think that what they're
mm,
building can be adaptable to one of those themes that you talked about,
mm.
how can people get in touch with you? Where can they meet you? How can they get themselves on your radar?
Yeah, so I always say the first port of call is our website. I know that sounds cliche, but we've got a specific innovation website. So I can send you a link after this, but it's innovation.ukpowernetworks.co.uk. If you go on there, there's a button that you can submit your ideas. It could be an idea for a potential product, or you can submit an idea if you've already got an established product and you say, oh, based on if you're listening to this podcast and you think, oh, my product is suitable in the construction industry, but actually there might be uses in the utility industry. Submit your ideas there.
Mm.
We do track every single idea. We might not get back to us as quickly as we like, because you can imagine hundreds and thousands of ideas come through that portal, but we will get back to it eventually. And and other things as well is obviously events, conferences. A lot of them are free to attend, because part of the conditions for SIF and NI, I think, is you have to publicly disseminate the information.
Right.
So we've got, there's certain conferences, events which are sponsored by Ofgem, UKRI, that anyone can free to attend, just to share that public, to share the public that knowledge and that learnings. Other spaces where I can go in contact, obviously, is, like I mentioned earlier, if you go on the DIC website, you could potentially look at call for innovations on there. You can go on the Gov website to look at the SIF rounds as well, call for ideas. So yeah, loads of different ways. But like I said, the key one is our website, innovation.ukpowernetworks.co.uk.
Amazing. That's so great. Ian, thank you so much for joining me, spending your lunchtime with me, and sharing all of that information. I think that there's so much in there, so much detail, and so much that people can go away and research and learn about that I'm sure they might not have known about before. So thank you so much for that.